the UFC could be making its long-awaited return to Brazil this fall. MMA Fighting has learned that the promotion is actively working on plans to host a fight night event in Rio de Janeiro, tentatively scheduled for October 11th at the Formality Arena. While the date and venue are being targeted, sources indicate the deal has not yet been finalized. If confirmed, the event would mark the UFC's first visit to Brazil since UFC 301 in May 2024. That card saw Alexandre Pantoja successfully defend his flyweight title against Steve Erceg in the main event, with MMA legend Jose Aldo co-headlining in a memorable return from retirement to face Jonathan Martinez. The event drew an energetic crowd of 14,514 fans to the Formality Arena, reaffirming Brazil's status as one of the most passionate fight markets in the world. However, the UFC's presence in the country has faced challenges in 2025. Notably, the promotion has been without a domestic broadcast partner since parting ways with Band TV at the beginning of the year. In the absence of a traditional TV deal, UFC events have been streaming exclusively on UFC Fight Pass in Brazil, limiting exposure but giving the company full control over distribution. Back in September 2024, UFC CEO Dana White hinted at bigger plans for the region, stating that the company was working on a big deal right now down in Brazil that hopefully will announce here pretty soon. Despite that announcement, no new broadcast partnership or major developments have been revealed publicly since. A return to Brazil, particularly to a city as historically significant as Rio de Janeiro, would be a welcome move for both the UFC and its Brazilian fanbase. The country has produced countless UFC legends and champions and remains a crucial part of the promotion's global identity. If the October event does come together, it could serve as a springboard for renewed efforts to re-establish a stronger media presence in the Brazilian market. Dustin Poirier might not be hanging up the gloves just yet, at least not if the odds makers are to be believed. On Thursday, former U.S. President Donald Trump made headlines by announcing his intention to host a UFC event on the White House grounds in 2026. The event would coincide with the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence and serve as a symbolic celebration of American culture and sports. Given Trump's long-standing friendship with UFC CEO Dana White, the idea, while ambitious, may not be as far-fetched as it sounds. With speculation already swirling, several big-name fighters have reportedly shown interest in competing on the historic card. Among those mentioned are Conor McGregor, Michael Chandler, and others. But it's the fighters headlining the UFC's next pay-per-view who seem to be leading the race, at least in the eyes of sportsbooks. On Sunday, BetOnline.ag released opening odds on who's most likely to headline the rumored UFC White House event. Leading the list is veteran fan favorite Dustin Poirier at plus 250 odds, followed closely by fellow former champion Max Holloway at plus 300. Rounding out the top three is current bantamweight champion Sean O'Malley at plus 400. One of the more surprising entries on the list is Conor McGregor. Despite his high-profile connection to Trump, having publicly supported the former president and even attending his inauguration, McGregor landed further down the odds board, coming in at plus 1,000 and ranked 8th overall. While nothing is official yet, and the White House fight card remains a concept rather than a confirmed event, the buzz is real. If it does happen, it could mark one of the most unique and high-profile moments in UFC history. And if the odds makers are right, it may also be the stage for Dustin Poirier's next and possibly final chapter. Shawn Strickland has pushed back against recent claims made by MMA legend Dan Henderson regarding his departure from Team Quest. Strickland, who trained under Henderson early in his UFC career, eventually moved on to Extreme Couture, where he went on to capture the UFC middleweight title. According to Henderson, however, Strickland didn't simply leave on his own terms, he was asked to go. Henderson shared his version of events during a recent appearance on the Overdogs podcast. He claimed that Strickland's conduct outside of training, particularly his habit of publicly criticizing teammates, created tension within the gym. Henderson said that while Strickland's intensity in training wasn't a problem, his behavior on social media crossed the line. "You know, he got in little argument matches with some of the guys that thought he was going too hard," Henderson said. "Then he would go online and talk shit about them. Just more socially, I didn't care what happened in the room. When you send it out for everybody to hear all that shish, it's just disrespectful to your training partners, guys that are in there training with you to help you out. He just did it too many times, I warned him a bunch, and then finally just said, hey dude, you've gotta go." Strickland was quick to respond to those remarks and offered a very different version of how things unfolded. He flat out denied being kicked out of Team Quest and said the decision to leave came after Henderson retired and the fight team dissolved. "None of this is true," Strickland wrote. "I was Dan's main training partner for his last fight. He retired, the fight team fell off, and when it was time to renew my membership, I left." However, Strickland did admit that he frequently mocked some of his teammates, but insisted it was all in jest. He is correct. "I would make fun of the fight team constantly. They would do yoga and skip sparring, lol. Keith Berry, I'm talking about you, haha. Funny thing is, we're both at Extreme Couture now, and spar regularly." Strickland's unfiltered personality has long been a hallmark of his public image, and this latest back and forth with Henderson only adds to his reputation as someone unafraid to speak his mind, even when it comes to former mentors or training partners. Robert Whittaker has a clear vision for how he wants to finish his career in the UFC. Set to face Reinier de Ridder on July 26th at UFC Abu Dhabi, Whittaker is looking to begin the final stretch of what he hopes will be a 4-fight run to one last shot at UFC Gold and a storybook retirement. 4 fights, Whittaker told Fox Sports Australia. "I see the light at the end of the tunnel, I want 4 more, that's me. I see the stepping stones needed to do what I want to do. 4 fights gets me into that title shot, gets me into a position to finish on top, to have that fairy tale ending. I'm working towards it." Though he's slipped against the division's elite in recent years, including a recent loss to Khamzat Chimaev, Whittaker has also consistently derailed rising contenders. Before the Chimaev loss, he racked up wins over Ikram Aliskerov and Paulo Costa, and over the last several years has added names like Marvin Vettori, Jared Cannonier, and Darren Till to his resume. Chimaev and current champion Dricus du Plessis, who meet at UFC 319 in August, are the 2 most recent fighters to beat Whittaker, and both are rematches he hopes to earn. But for now, the focus is solely on Reinier de Ridder, a fellow grappling specialist who's made waves with a 3-0 UFC start in 2024. Looking back on the Chimaev bout, where a choke led to Whittaker sustaining dental damage, he's taken the loss in stride. "He was just better than me on the day," Whittaker said. "I'm not disheartened in my skill set. I go into this fight still with a lot of confidence." Confident in his striking and looking to keep de Ridder from taking him down, Whittaker remains driven. He's got the end in sight, but he's not done yet. Former UFC superstar Jon Jones is once again stirring the MMA rumor mill, less than a month after officially announcing his retirement. The former light heavyweight and heavyweight champion last competed at UFC 309 in November, where he defended his heavyweight title for the first time with a dominant finish over Stipe Miocic at Madison Square Garden. That bout followed his triumphant return to the octagon in early 2023, when he submitted Cyril Gane to capture the then-vacant heavyweight belt. Following the Miocic win, fans hoped Jones would move on to a blockbuster heavyweight unification bout against interim champion Tom Aspinall. But that dream was seemingly dashed when UFC CEO Dana White revealed after UFC Baku that Bones had officially retired, putting a premature end to a heavyweight run that lasted just 2 fights. Though Jones's retirement didn't come as a major shock, especially given his lukewarm responses when asked about facing Aspinall, his time away from the spotlight didn't last long. Within weeks, the 37-year-old was back in headlines after cryptically hinting that he'd re-entered the UFC's testing pool, reigniting speculation about a possible comeback. In true Jon Jones fashion, he's since added more fuel to the fire with a cryptic post on social media, stating, "It feels nice to be the hunter and not the hunted for once." The comment, vague but telling, landed just days before UFC Nashville, where Dana White is expected to make an appearance and likely face questions about Jones' status and future with the organization. The buzz around a Jones return grew even louder after former President Donald Trump recently announced plans to host a UFC event at the White House grounds in 2026 as part of the United States' 250th anniversary celebration. Given Trump's close friendship with Dana White and long-standing support for the UFC, the idea, while unprecedented, isn't entirely implausible. Jones quickly jumped on the hype, publicly backing the concept and even engaging with a fan-made graphic that imagined him defeating Aspinall at the proposed event. His endorsement of the image only deepened speculation that the former champ is eyeing one last marquee moment in the octagon. In the meantime, Tom Aspinall has already begun teasing details of his first defense as newly promoted undisputed UFC heavyweight champion. While no official opponent has been named, the 32-year-old Brit has made it clear he expects to fight before year's end. That timeline only adds intrigue to Jones's recent moves. Longtime MMA fans wouldn't be surprised to see Bones throw his name back into the mix, especially if the UFC is considering something special for 2026. Whether he actually returns to face Aspinall remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. When it comes to Jon Jones, retirement never feels truly permanent. Topuria seems to view a potential showdown with Patty Pimble as little more than a formality. El Matador stunned the MMA world this past weekend with a spectacular first-round knockout of former lightweight champion Charles Oliveira in the main event of UFC 317. With that emphatic performance, Topuria not only claimed the vacant 155-pound belt, but also cemented his status as a two-division UFC champion, making history in the process. However, it didn't take long for the spotlight to shift toward what's next. In a dramatic post-fight moment, Topuria came face-to-face with Patty "the Batty" Pimble inside the octagon, sparking a fiery confrontation that reignited their long-standing rivalry. The intense exchange immediately captured fans' attention, and just like that, Pimble appears to have leapfrogged top contenders like Arman Tsarukyan and Justin Gaethje to become the frontrunner for Topuria's first title defense. The potential matchup has no shortage of backstory. The bad blood between Topuria and Pimble goes all the way back to March 2022, when a verbal feud between the two fighters boiled over into a near-physical altercation at a fighter hotel ahead of UFC London. What started as heated words quickly evolved into a full-blown rivalry, with both men taking frequent jabs at each other through interviews and social media ever since. Now, with both fighters surging in popularity and the UFC eager to capitalize on marketable matchups, a title bout between Topuria and Pimble seems not only plausible, but potentially one of the biggest events the promotion could put together right now. In fact, some pundits and even former champions are already calling it the most high-profile fight the UFC can make at this moment. Topuria, for his part, is more than confident about the outcome. Speaking with TMZ Sports after his title victory, the undefeated champion didn't hold back in his assessment of the potential fight. According to him, a matchup with Pimble would be far from competitive. "All the fans around the world, I think they want to see that fight," Topuria said. "And I have to be honest, I think it's one of the easiest fights I could take in the lightweight division. I can do with him whatever I want, in reality." Topuria emphasized that while the fight would deliver massive entertainment for fans, it would also give him the perfect platform to showcase his skills. "It's a very exciting fight for the audience, and it's one I'll enjoy a lot, but more importantly, it's a fight where I'll be able to shine once again." Having accurately predicted and delivered finishes in each of his last 3 outings, Topuria's confidence seems well-founded. Whether or not Pimble truly deserves the title shot over more proven contenders is a matter of debate, but if the UFC is looking for spectacle, drama, and mainstream buzz, this is the fight to make. And if Topuria gets his wish, it may not last long once the cage door closes. At 37, Alex Pereira is nearing the tail end of his fighting prime, yet remains one of the UFC's biggest draws. That status has opened doors, super fights, potential heavyweight clashes, and huge paydays, but it may also be closing the door on unfinished business in the division he once ruled. For Ankalaev, the legacy-defining fights still matter. He wants to prove his championship wasn't a fluke, that his win over Pereira was more than just a tactical masterclass. It was a turning point. Whether the UFC brass push for the rematch or move in a different direction remains to be seen. But one thing is clear. Magomed Ankalaev is not backing down, and he's ready to remind the world, again, that sometimes the most dangerous fighters are the ones who don't care about spotlight or spectacle. They just want the fight. After the bout, there was mutual respect. Both men nodded to the idea of a rematch. But now, more than 3 months later, there's still no movement. Ankalaev continues to push for the second fight, while Pereira appears to have shifted his focus elsewhere, possibly toward higher profile, higher paycheck opportunities. Speculation about Pereira's interest in a heavyweight jump has only fueled questions about whether he's done chasing light heavyweight supremacy. Today, the situation escalated again. Ankalaev took to social media to blast Pereira, claiming the Brazilian is once more requesting a fight during Ramadan, something Ankalaev sees as either a misunderstanding of his priorities or, more cynically, a deliberate ploy. His post read, "Breaking news. Alex now asking he wanna fight me during Ramadan again. I need more time. And the other clown he have to do his homework. Let me fight Carlos the First, think he's more dangerous than all of them." The comment, half sarcastic, half serious, immediately drew reactions online. Some fans criticized Pereira, accusing him of trying to game the timing of the rematch. Others saw Ankalaev's frustration as proof that Pereira may be sidestepping a tough stylistic matchup. And then there's the wild card, Carlos Ulberg. The New Zealander has surged in popularity and rankings, and Ankalaev name-dropping him suggests he's ready to pivot if Pereira continues to avoid the dance. The UFC is officially returning to Abu Dhabi for UFC 321, with the event locked in for October 25, 2025, at the Etihad Arena. This marks the continuation of a yearly tradition that began in 2019, where the UFC brings a major numbered pay-per-view event to the capital city of the United Arab Emirates. The announcement was made through the UFC's social media channels, along with a call for fans to register their interest for updates on ticket sales and the official fight card lineup. Abu Dhabi holds a special place in UFC history, not just as a consistent international host city, but also as a financial and operational lifeline for the promotion. The UAE's investment into the UFC dates back to the early 2010s, but the relationship became even more critical during the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2020, when the world shut down, Abu Dhabi opened its doors and provided the infrastructure for what would famously be dubbed Fight Island, a biosecure bubble that allowed international fighters to compete while most global sports leagues were inactive. Since then, the UFC has prioritized Abu Dhabi with some of its most important events each year. Each visit to Abu Dhabi has delivered a blockbuster main event. In 2023, it was headlined by the highly anticipated rematch between Islam Makhachev and Alexander Volkanovski, a champion versus champion clash that drew global attention. In 2024, the spotlight was on Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway, a featherweight bout with major title implications. Both cards solidified Abu Dhabi as a go-to location for high-stakes fights, particularly ones involving international stars with massive global fan bases. As for what UFC 321 might offer, nothing has been confirmed yet aside from the date and venue. However, speculation is already swirling. One potential headliner is Islam Makhachev versus Jack Della Maddalena, especially since Makhachev has made it clear he wants to move up to welterweight and pursue a second belt. If that matchup gets booked, it would mark yet another title fight for Makhachev in Abu Dhabi, cementing him as a perennial main event presence in the Middle East. Another likely candidate for the card is Tom Aspinall, who recently became the undisputed UFC heavyweight champion following Jon Jones' retirement. UFC President Dana White has already hinted that Aspinall's first title defense could come soon, and Abu Dhabi would make an ideal international stage for that bout. If Ciryl Gane ends up being the opponent, it sets up a compelling England versus France showdown in front of a global audience. There are also other big names who could be featured on the card depending on outcomes over the summer. Khamzat Chimaev, Dricus du Plessis, Sean O'Malley, or Ilia Topuria could all be potential additions depending on how their respective situations evolve. Abu Dhabi's cards are often stacked from top to bottom, and UFC 321 is expected to follow suit. For now, fans can mark their calendars for October 25th and anticipate a massive event in one of the UFC's most important international markets. More details, including fight announcements and ticket sales, are expected to roll out over the coming weeks and months.